Hi, I'm Pete Brown, here in my home office and studio for this year's Microsoft Build event. I hope you're doing well, and I hope you're staying safe. And I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch my video here today. So this build, I have two short introductory sessions that go together. This one is about building your first applications for Windows 10, and then the other video I have just has some delighters for for developers of all types, cross-platform, etc. If you're interested in contacting me, or if you have questions about the session here today, you can reach me on Twitter at Pete_Brown, and also my YouTube channel here, which is mostly music and construction and things along those lines. But soon we'll have more Windows content on it, is also available at this link. So what are we going to talk about here today? First of all, we're going to talk about why you want to build native applications. Now, I'm not trying to convince you to build native applications yourself, but I want to give you some reasons as to why you might want to consider building a native application as opposed to a web application or something more cross-platform. Then I'm going to give you some information about the different investments that we're making for native applications on Windows 10 and give you some sense of direction and some sense of where to spend your investment of time for learning these different technologies. Then I'm going to walk you through building your first applications. I'm going to show you a couple of different types of applications on Windows that you can build, all native, of course. And then finally, at the end of this, I'm going to recap and provide you with some information for further exploration so that you can learn more as you're ready to. Everything that I'm talking about here today is available at this resource link, so you don't have to worry about writing down any other links that we have in the presentation or looking up anything over in the documentation site. I have links to all the relevant stuff here right at this resource page, and that is this one resource page covers both sessions as well as a good chunk of the other stuff that we're talking about for Windows 10 this year at Build. Now, this is an introductory session. This is a foundation session. So one of the things you might be wondering is, why do I want to build a native application? Hey, all the cool hotness is on the web these days, right? But there's still lots of reasons why those types of applications, those cross-platform applications or non-native applications, may not be appropriate for the specific tasks that you are trying to achieve. First of all, we have lots of native APIs in Windows that these applications can all take advantage of. Of course, web applications and PWAs and things along those lines are able to take advantage of a good number of these. But if you need to build an application that is really kind of as close to the metal as possible, has really high performance when interacting with, say, external devices, or working with, some of the more advanced touch APIs, or using any of our local machine learning APIs, any of those types of things, you are going to be better served by building a native application on the platform. The other reason you might want to consider this is, there are a billion different Windows PCs out there. And it's not just the ones that we produce as part of the Surface line. The PCs are, from our partners and all the other OEMs who create PCs that have devices to the devices associated with them, sensors and different types of APIs associated with that, which are really only available to native applications. You can't necessarily get to those from a web application today. Eventually, the web standards will catch up, but it's this leapfrog game where the first people who have access to a new class of devices, new class of APIs, are the ones building those native applications. Now, I just do want to be really super clear here. If you're building applications that don't need to use some of these native features, if you're building a forms over data application, or if you're building something else that can be equally served well as a web application, then by all means, if HTML and JavaScript are your thing, then build those as a web application. I don't want to try to talk you out of that. But again, if you want to build some of these other types of applications where performance is key, or for example, I work with a lot of music application developers. developers. And those music application developers need to have their applications have really low latency access to the audio stack in Windows. And they need to be able to talk directly to drivers, and they need to be able to load external DLLs directly into the process so that they can operate as plugins, VSTs in most cases here. Those types of applications, clearly a native application is going to give them the most flexibility in those cases. All right, now that I've convinced you that native applications are still a thing on Windows, let me tell you about some of the investments that we're making to support native application developers. So this is not a comprehensive slide. We have lots of ways of building applications on Windows, and not all of them are created by us. There are third parties who create their own languages and frameworks and tools, which work perfectly well for building native applications on Windows. But I do want to focus here on just a few of these. So the first is .NET and C# or even Visual Basic applications. If you want to build an application that has kind of the classic Windows UI, the stuff that we usually think of with white text boxes and gray backgrounds, then you're looking at something like a Windows Forms application. Although Windows Forms has come a long way and you can certainly do more stylized applications, its strength is really in that native look and feel to be able to build applications that have that kind of very business focused look to them. And Windows Forms is still super popular today. So if you're looking for a real easy way to build a native application for Windows and get started, Windows Forms might be the right thing for you to take a look at. Second, if you're building an application that is going to run on the console, a command line application, we have tools for those, or we have application types for that as well. You can build console applications in .NET. You can also build console applications in C++ and other technologies on Windows. Now, if you want one of our newer UI stacks, in this case is XAML UI, right now there are two places that you can go to get that. You can build a Windows Presentation Foundation application, a WPF app, and that is another .NET-based application. It has the same level of access to the operating system that a Windows Forms application has, but it has a XAML UI layer on top of that. And then if you want to use some of our newest APIs and you want to build an application that we commonly think of as a type of application that goes into the store, although it doesn't have to go into the Windows Store, then a UWP or Universal Windows application is the way that you want to go there. Now, there are some differences there. So, a UWP application today doesn't have all the same operating system level access that a WPF or a Windows Forms application has. But on the other side, today, a WPF or Windows Forms application, it takes a lot more work to do things like access the webcam or use some of the newer UWP APIs or WinRT APIs, which you'll often hear of them referred to that way, on Windows. So which one you're going to choose to start with if you're looking at .NET is going to be based upon the types of features that you need in the application. And we have this all documented on the site for which applications can use which kind of features, as well as, what's your deployment model and kind of where you tend to bring this application in the future. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about why this decision might change a bit for you as we get closer to the end of this year, but we'll hold that thought just for now. Now, the second type of application programming language you might want to use is JavaScript. If you're a web developer and you're somebody who's used to building applications using web technologies, then building using something like React Native might be the best choice for you to build a native application on Windows. We have a version of React Native that actually generates a UWP application behind the scenes. So, you think about React Native for use in mobile devices and other types of devices. The Windows target for that is a UWP application. So you get access to all the same APIs and all the same functionality that you have as part of UWP today. Now, for the C++ developers in the room, you may not be starting out brand new on C++ today. If you are, awesome. I recently went through that process of relearning C++ after 20 years of not using it, and so that was kind of fun for me and exciting to see all the new features that are in C++. But we have, kind of some legacy or some classic UIs that you can do in C++. You can do some MFC, Microsoft Foundation classes and other technology, but nobody's really starting new with that today. So I wouldn't recommend that you start new with an MFC application today unless you have a really good reason to do so. There are third-party UI stacks. Some of those, for example, like Qt or some based on OpenGL, are used by a lot of application developers to provide UI for their applications, especially when they're building cross-platform native applications. Now, we're also looking at some of the things that we're doing with Windows UI, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. But C++ is able to take be able to use those APIs and be able to use that UI stack natively as well. And that's super exciting because this is the first time we've had a new UI stack for C++ in quite some time. Now, you can also build UWP applications using C++ WinRT. Now, C++ WinRT, even though it has /WinRT in it, this is standards-based C++. Everything is contained in headers and libraries. This is not, the C++ CX we had before with the little hats that you had to use for dereferencing pointers and things like that. Now, this is standards-based C++, and you have access to all the UWP APIs, including the UI layer. So you can build a really high-performing C++ application with XAML-based UI as a UWP app using C++ WinRT. And there are also a bunch of other things that you can do with C++ WinRT as well for different application types. And it really is one of the most flexible way to build applications. Now, I mentioned a minute ago that we're doing some things to make the Windows UI a little bit more flexible and use that from other different types of application types. And that's a really important direction that we're taking here. If you think so, we've had .NET, and we've had .NET Framework and .NET Core, which are now sort of converged together into .NET 5. But we've had these different flavors of .NET, each with their own UI stacks. Then we've had UWP applications with its own UI stack and API level. And then we have had, C++ Win32 applications with MFC and other technologies, right? And all of those have been separate silos. You couldn't really... There were some hacky type things you could do to integrate some of them, but you couldn't really do, say, a .NET application that used the new UWP XAML UI layer, and you couldn't do a C++ application that used the same thing, right? Like we had all of these different UI layers were very highly tied to the framework that they were built around. So why would we do that, right? It's just sort of the way that they grew up, right? We don't want to... this isn't something necessarily that we set out from at the beginning to say, yes, we're going to create all these different siloed UIs. But as these came up in different periods in history, and .NET, like Windows Forms, is from 2001 or somewhere right around that range was Windows Forms 1.0. So it's actually got some. It's been around for a little bit, right? And WPF is around the Windows Vista timeframe, if I remember correctly. So these have all been around for a long time and have come up at different points in history. And as such, they have been each developed independently and then sort of kept in their own silos. And that's just not the way developers want to build applications today. So UWP and the Windows 10 developer platform all up in Windows 10 are evolving. We are decoupling the parts. We are making them more modular. And so that's really great. So you'll be able to now take, later this year, the UI stack for Windows, and you can package that with your application. You don't have to worry about, which version of Windows am I installing this application on, right? Does that have the right UI controls that I want? Or instead, we're lifting that whole piece up, all of those different APIs, bundling them together and making them so that you can take them with you with your applications, and you don't have to be tied to a specific release of Windows 10, and you can also use those APIs and use that XAML and use that UI layer from all the different languages in Windows. So you can even use that UI from, say, Windows Forms. So if you want to have, all the Windows Forms greatness that you have been, using for a long time, or in your new application, and incorporate little islands of functionality that are from the UWP UI stack, you can do that. And that's all part of something that we're calling Project Reunion. Now, there are other sessions here at Build this year that go into much more depth than that. So I'm not going to kind of steal all their thunder here today, but do seek those out. Again, all the resources for that are in the resource links. So now I think the best thing to do is to just hop into a demo and show you some of the different ways that you can get started building applications today. Now, a really good place to start is actually our documentation. So if you go to developer.microsoft.com, or if you go to dev.windows.com, or any of those other aliases, it's going to bring you here to the Microsoft developer page. And on this page, you're going to see there are a whole bunch of getting started tutorials for you. So if you want to start building web applications or mobile applications, or if you want to learn how to work with AI with the tools that we have available for that, or build bots or build IoT applications, it's all right here. Now, I'm going to click on Windows apps because that's what we're talking about here today. And that brings you over to the Windows app developer documentation. Notice there's an ad for Microsoft Build. I hope you're enjoying Microsoft Build. Don't forget to register. Now, if we go over here and look, there are different types of Windows applications that you can build, or desktop applications. We also have a section here on WSL. I talked very briefly about WSL in my other video, but I think it's totally worth checking out if you have even the slightest inclination to do anything with Linux on Windows. It's super fun. It's actually one of my favorite tools that's in the release of Windows that I'm using here today, 2004. Now, if I want to go down a little bit further here, it goes through the different frameworks that we have. Now, I'd mentioned earlier, Win32 apps, WPF apps, Windows Forms apps, and UWP. And coincidentally, that's exactly the set of things that are listed here. So if I go into UWP, because that's what we're going to go over in just a second, if I click on Overview, you're going to see there's tons of documentation here. Like, it brings you all the way from if you are brand new to UWP all the way through to, if you need to complete some kind of more advanced tutorials so that you can further your knowledge of something like UWP. All right, so that's super useful. I'm not going to go through these particular tutorials here today, but I do have something fun planned. So I have Visual Studio open here, and I am going to create a new project. And that new project is going to be a universal Windows application. We'll get to the other application types here shortly. And that's going to be in C#. And you see here, like, when you are in Visual Studio, and by the way, you can use the free version of Visual Studio, which is free for small developers, open source, individuals, etc., the community edition. You can use that to build these types of applications. But when I create a new project here, I get all the different types of projects that Visual Studio can create. And what gets listed here depends upon what you set up in Visual Studio to begin with, or what you have added later via the Visual Studio installer. In this case, I'm going to, like I said, create a blank application. I'm going to hit Next. And I'm going to now configure this project. I'm just going to leave the name, the simple name here. And then I am going to change the location here to C demos, just to keep my repos folder clean. I don't want to clutter up all my GitHub stuff. And the solution name is going to be App1. If you're brand new to Visual Studio and .NET applications in particular, you have a solution, and that solution can contain multiple projects, and the solution has its own name that's separate from the project name. The solution name doesn't really matter. It's good to name it something meaningful, but it's really the project name that is going to automatically set up things like the executable name, the application title, etc. So that's the one that you want to make sure has a little bit more something useful. So I could say graph demo here as the project name. You see it's that the solution name is the same, but that doesn't really matter. And so I am going to hit create. Now, this is one of the first decisions that you're really going to run into when you build a UWP application. What version of the SDK do I want to use to build a UWP application? Well, that is really, and again, this will change a little bit later with some of the things we're doing to reunite all the different APIs. But what this is telling you is what version of Windows is the minimum version that you're going to support. Our SDK versions and our Windows versions are pretty much one-to-one. So I can say the minimum version of Windows I'm going to support is, I'm going to say 1903 here, right? And the target version is also going to be 1903. So that's, just a couple of releases back. What this controls is what APIs you have access to and what, kind of what the behavior of those APIs are. So if you have, so if we introduce a new feature in 1909 that has a new API associated with it, but you are targeting 1903, your application is not going to use that API. It's going to be, kind of locked to the 1903 APIs. And then you can increase this number each time that you build the application. If you want to, reassess this and use one of the later SDKs, you're certainly capable or able to do that. Able, not unable, excuse me. All right, so now it's going to create the application. And here we go. So this is a UWP application, and I'd mentioned that it uses XAML. So if I go over here, there's a XAML page called mainpage.xaml. And you see it pops up. And this is, as you can imagine, the main page for the application. Now, there are all sorts of controls that I have over here that I can drop in into this page. But also, if I don't want to work in the text side, I type XAML by hand. I tend not to use the designer, so I spend a lot of time here. So I have it defaulted to always open in this view. But there is a designer. So if I click on the designer page and I want to, say, fit the whole page here, I can say fit all. You see that? And I'm going to go down here and I'm going to drag in a text block. And what a text block is just a way of displaying text in our application. Now I can, mess with all the properties over here in the designer. Again, this is super easy if you're looking to explore and figure out, how the property system works for XAML applications. I can say I want 48 pixels. Sego UI is the font that I'm going to use here, et cetera, et cetera. So I can mess with all that stuff. And I'm going to say hello world for the text. And there you go. Now, if I look at the XAML behind that, what it's done is it's created quite a bit of XAML for me. So let me just blow this out a little bit so you can see what we're looking at here. It's created a text block, which is the control we dropped in. And it has set it so its horizontal alignment is left. Now that horizontal alignment is based upon the container that it's in, which in this case is a grid, which itself is inside the page, right? So if I go back over to design here, I can see that this is based on being aligned from the left. And then it has this margin, 688, 460, 00. That 688, 460, 00, that is controlling where it exists on that page. I can simplify this a bit, so I can get rid of that margin, and I can say horizontal alignment is center. Now, I didn't do any vertical alignment. I just said horizontal alignment. So if I go back to the design view, you see I am now centered horizontally. And back to here, I can say vertical alignment, center. That was what the problem was. See, you can make mistakes too. There we are. So it did have a vertical alignment, but it was set to top. So I have set that to center. And here you see it's centered on the page. Now, if I were to run this, I would see the same thing. And no matter how I resize this page, it would always stay centered here on this canvas. Now, the same types of alignment controls and everything there work with buttons, with lists, and all sorts of other controls that you would expect to be able to use in an application like this. But I just wanted to do the simple hello world to begin with there. So again, use the designer or use the XAML view. Either way works just fine for you. You see in the XAML view, you get IntelliSense that auto-completes the property names. And if you're in the design view, that's something that's very familiar to Windows Forms developers and folks that want to visually lay out the page as opposed to hand editing the XAML for that. And there's nothing wrong with either approach. Either way works just fine. It's just whichever ways you're going to be the most productive. All right. Now, that's not really the demo I want to do here. So that was a very simple hello world for XAML, but I want to add in just a little bit more. You saw the name of the project was Graph Demo. And so that that is because I want to integrate this application with the Microsoft Graph. I want to provide a little bit of basic functionality like you might have inside an enterprise application. And I'm going to do that the best coding way possible. I am going to paste in some code. Or paste in markup in this case. Okay, so I'm going to use the clipboard here, but annoyingly, it wants to open up outside of the recording area that I have for this video, which is bizarre. So I just want to show you really quickly the clipboard manager in Windows here, just inside Notepad. So if I hit Windows V, right, it is giving me the clipboard history that I have here. And so I could paste in any of the different things. And one of those happens to be the XAML, in this case, the namespaces for this project, and another one is going to be the XAML itself. So when I hit Windows V and paste it in, understand I'm using the clipboard manager for that. And again, I have a gigantic screen here, and it's deciding to open up off to the side. So let me just Windows V that, and I'm going to add in, there's our namespaces. And then I'm going to replace this whole grid here, which is a layout container, and I'm going to Windows V that, and I'm going to replace that with some wonderful XAML. And that XAML here is going to have functionality for connecting to the graph. Now you notice that everything here is coming up with the kind of aqua colored or cyan colored squigglies, and that is because I have not yet added the NuGet package. NuGet packages are a way of adding external features to your application to be able to build upon the work that others have done. Microsoft releases a lot of features as NuGet packages, but then third parties do as well. So I'm going to right click on the project. I'm going to say Manage NuGet Packages, and it defaults to installed. I'm going to go to Browse, and I say Microsoft Toolkit Graph Controls. And you see here's Microsoft Toolkit Graph Controls. I'm going to add that to the project. And this is going to provide a whole bunch of Microsoft Graph related functionality for a UWP application. All right, now if I go back to the main page XAML, here we are. You see it cleared up those errors. And now, so let me just go through this very quickly, since I'm assuming that you may in fact be new to XAML in this case here. And the same types of things that I'm discussing for UWP would apply to WPF and anything else that uses XAML here. So first of all, we have a provider for the Microsoft Graph. I'm not going to scroll over to the right because it's got a private application ID in it that I'd prefer not to have in the video. But this is what sets up our connectivity to the graph. You can do this in code by using properties on the objects, but they've also made it possible to plug this directly into XAML so that you don't have to write the code there. From there, I have a grid, and a grid is a layout container that lets you lay things out on a grid, right? So you can have rows and columns, and you can constrain different UI objects into specific cells of that grid. And it's honestly one of the most commonly used layout containers in XAML. Now, inside the grid, the first thing that I have is a login button. And you see it has the namespace WGT. So if I scroll up here, we'll see the namespace WGT is the Microsoft Toolkit Graph Controls. So that is where that control is housed. And then if I look a little bit further down here, we have a text block, which you already saw here earlier. And then we have an items control. And an items control is just a way of listing listing items on the screen. So a list box is a type of items control. There are multiple ways of listing multiple things one after another on the screen. Now, how you control what shows up and how it shows up is with this item template. And the item template in this case is going to show the display name of the person object. Okay. This is all the types of things that you'll see covered in the developer documentation for getting started. But I just wanted to give you some context here for what we're actually looking at. All right, so I'm getting ready now to run this application. So I'm going to run it here. Let's go ahead and make sure everything compiles fine. And sing your compile song. Sometimes it's good to have a little compile song that you sing while things are actually working. And the application opened up over there, so let me pull it in. All right, so now here's our application. You see this little bar at the top is something that it only shows up when you're running the application under the Visual Studio Debugger, and it has a bunch of functionality for making it easier for you to visually debug parts of the application. So I am going to click Sign In here. All right, you can sign in to the Microsoft Graph. I'm going to hit Windows V. Oh, and see it actually opened up over here this time. So here is the clipboard history. So I'm going to choose Megan. And I'm going to type in the password. All right. And any second now, there you go. You see Megan Bowen up here on the top. And now what this is going to do now is I can start typing names. Now think about when you're building something like an email application where it has autocomplete of names, and how much work is involved in doing something like that, integrating with Active Directory or integrating with Exchange or anything. Well, if you use the Microsoft Graph, it's super simple to get to that data through these controls. So I can start typing a name like T, and there's a distribution group, Tailspin Toys. I can say L, Lee. I can do Isaiah. There we are. And you see here we have this automatically styled because this is part of the control that the Microsoft Graph Toolkit provided. And then we have the items control down here at the bottom that lists all of the items that I have added in this because of that binding statement that we saw in XAML. That second part, that binding statement, isn't necessary, but I think it's good because it shows you some of the interaction between this control that we got from the toolkit and the rest of the XAML UI system. So really simple way to build kind of like your first hello world application. And the reason I picked this example is because this is the kind of stuff that business application developers have to do all the time, and it's usually a lot of work. And if you can leverage the work of third parties, whether there be Microsoft through toolkits, which have community contributions, or actual third parties who are building controls and toolkits and everything for these languages, you'll save yourself a ton of time. So once you get past the hello world stage, you definitely want to be leveraging the work of others so you don't have to rebuild everything from scratch each time. All right, I'll close this application. And that's it for the first part of the demo. We'll take a look here in just a second with some of the other types of applications that you can build. So we have some great tutorials that will help you with building Windows Forms applications. Windows Forms applications are going to be just kind of drag and drop on the UI. So I can say, let's see, File, New Project, and I'm going to say Windows Forms. I think that's what's going to come up. It's been a while since I created one. UWP, that's a problem. So if I go under Desktop, Windows Forms app, .NET Framework, .NET Core, etc. We're going to have some more templates here coming soon for .NET 5, but I can build a Windows Forms application for .NET Core, which is the cross-platform version of the .NET Framework. So it's a kind of a subset of the .NET Framework, but it also works on Mac and Linux and other operating systems. And then we have the full .NET Framework, which is the .NET Framework that we have had, since the early 2000. Around 1999 is when I started messing with alphas and stuff at the company I was working with at the time. So it's 20, 21 years old or so at this point in time. So we have had some changes. So if you want to build something new today in a Windows Forms application, I would suggest that you pick .NET Core because that is the newest version. It has really great performance and also is going to be the easiest for you to move to .NET 5 should you decide to do so. .NET Framework version is really kind of kept around because, one, it still works and it works perfectly fine, but it's also there for backwards compatibility for people who are building those applications. So if I choose a .NET Core application and I hit Next, Windows Forms app, that's fine. I'm going to have this in a new solution, and it's going to create that for me. And then you get standard kind of .NET stuff where you have individual forms that you can use, and you can use the design surfaces for those forms and be able to build applications using drag and drop features and be able to again leverage a more visual approach to the design work. I'd also like to show you here the WPF approach for building applications. So I can look at File, New Project again, and I'm going to say presentation. So if I look WPF app.NET Framework, WPF app.NET Core, same thing. If you can build them in .NET Core today, that's the approach I'd recommend. I'm going to do a straight up .NET Framework one here today. I hit next. And I'm not going to, provide any real detail to this application, but let me just go through the process of creating this for you. And you'll see this is very similar to what we did with UWP. So instead of the base class that we had before, we have a window class because this is designed more from the ground up to create straight up application windows, whereas UWP was designed at first for full screen applications, and then those became windowed afterwards. So there's a little bit of difference there in the XAML, but everything else, besides the little differences, is going to be very familiar to you. So if you learn how to build UWP applications, you're going to have the basics of building XAML applications using WPF down, because the language is very, very similar. The markup is very, very similar. And of course, if you build UWP applications today, the UWP XAML is what moves into WinUI, which can be used by WPF applications in the future. So again, that's really kind of where I would invest your time there today. Now, I've already gone through the process of building a XAML application. I'm not going to spend your time there doing that. But what I do want to do is get out of Visual Studio here and do something I think a little fun. So I'm going to open up Terminal. And so here is the Microsoft Windows terminal. If you don't have this yet, I highly recommend that you get it. It's available free in the Microsoft Store. It's open source and available on GitHub. You can see you can have tabs. You can have multiple different shells available to you, including, like I said, WSL for doing stuff for Linux, for example. Right. So here is WSL. If I can do mount C demos. And you see here is the folder that I've been doing demos with on the PC. So it says full integration with the Windows operating system and access to all the files. But anyway, so if I get back over here to the command prompt, what I want to do is I want to create a new .NET application from the command line. So first of all, I have the .NET SDK installed for .NET 5, one of the latest previews that we have. You can see here, if I do .NET's version, it's preview 3. Okay. Now, if I want to create any of the types of .NET applications from the command line, I can do everything that I did in Visual Studio right from here. So I'm going to say .NET new WPF, and I can also do .NET new Windows Forms. In this case, I'm going to do .NET new console because I want to show you one of the other types of applications you can build on Windows. And the output folder is going to say hello world. Okay. And so this is creating, using the .NET template for a console application, a hello world app. So if I go to hello world and look there is my program.cs. And I can use Notepad if I wanted to and say program.cs. And I say hello world from .NET 5. Yay. Save that. And if I type .NET run here, you'll see there is the output on the command line. Now, just like you can from Visual Studio and kind of the default behavior from Visual Studio, I can compile and package this application so it runs standalone and I don't have to run it using the .NET run command. And that'll start up a lot faster than what you just saw here. And it also becomes something that you can deploy to other PCs, right? Okay, so that was super fun. And of course, I can run this from WSL as well. I run this on Linux machines or run it on Mac or whatever I would like there. So let me just go back to the slides for a second. Here we are. So to kind of recap some of the things I mentioned here today. So native applications, I still think, are the best way to tap native features of the operating system. It's certainly, again, if you want to build web applications or PWAs or any other kind of portable applications, if that is appropriate for what you're trying to do, then that's awesome. I'm not trying to talk you out of that. But I want you to know that you do have the power of native applications on Windows, should your application or need that, or should you be more comfortable in that kind of environment. We have free tooling, so you can use Visual Studio for free. You can use GitHub for free. You can use all these different tools here free for individual developers, for open source development, for small teams, etc. And really, we have choice in applications. I showed you you can build UWP applications, but we're not trying to force you to build a UWP application. You can build WPF applications, and those WPF applications you can build on .NET Core, the upcoming .NET 5, or on the .NET Framework, which we've had around forever. Again, I recommend if you're starting today and you want to do this, and today is what to say, it's May 13th of 2020, I recommend that you start by using .NET Core as the kind of mature, fully functional version of the .NET kind of ecosystem to use there today. And when you're looking a little bit later to kind of move forward, then look at .NET 5, which is finally kind of converging all the .NET work we've done before, and it makes your future decisions a whole lot easier, right? So use .NET Core there today. You can pick different languages, so you can build everything that you'd want in C++ if that's your thing. You can build in C# or Visual Basic. You can build certain types of applications in JavaScript using things like React Native, which automatically kind of compile down to UWP. We have a lot of choices there. And if you don't like the ones that we have, there are other languages and tools that other people have. So we also have languages like F# at Microsoft, and we have experimental languages. There are third parties that have implementations of Pascal, and of course you could do whatever you would like there. And different ones will have different levels of access to the native features of the platform, but you can kind of take that in as part of your decision criteria. Again, if you don't like the offerings that we have, or if you find something else that is more suitable. So finally, all the resources that we've covered here today can be found in that aka.ms Build 2020 Windows Dev link. You'll have access to all the different documentation and kind of a one-stop shop for all the things that we have here. And then finally, connect with us. If you're, starting out building these applications and you're using the tools and technologies that I talked about here today, follow us at Microsoft 365 Dev so that you can, have more of a conversation with us. Subscribe to the different videos, get certified in development, learn more about integrating things like the Microsoft Graph into your applications, etc. And with that, I'd like to once again say thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time here with me today, and I wish you the best of luck on your journey to becoming a Windows developer. Thank you.